Let's talk about Fritz Von Erich in Texas. What are your memories of working down in Texas for Fritz?
Well, Fritz Von Erich, I really liked the man really well. The one mistake he made in his life, he didn't make his kids learn how to wrestle. Right? He had his every one of his kids would go on TV with the world champion, and he'd go 15 minutes through. He didn't care if they'd been in the business a week or 6 months. He would never let a world champion beat any of his boys. And the fallacy of that was people realized that David should have beat everybody, maybe even Kerry, but the rest of the guys were actually too small, didn't have that wrestling experience behind them, and he pushed them way too hard. And I think some of the tragedies that happened could be contributed to that fallacy.
No, you actually worked with a young Kevin Von Erich. What are your memories of working with Kevin?
Well, Kevin, believe it or not, was an all-state football player a couple years, right?
Right.
Kevin was real funny. He broke his ankle twice in football. Never could wear wrestling shoes, right? I was always against wrestling guys barefooted. Because if you think about it, if I was wrestling you was barefooted, why wouldn't I step on your foot?
Right, right.
I mean, that's so stupid. It was just like today, one of the mistakes Vince had, he has most of the women as managers, right? I'm thinking of Bruiser Brody, myself included. Why wouldn't you slap one of them girls? You can beat every one of them. But he has the same thing that he had with the Grand Wizard. Nobody can touch his girls. And the girls go way too far. I mean, I see him tripping guys up in the ring, no. And as I think about it, today, Vince has got it so there's not even a man that's a manager in the WWE. Am I right about that or not?
Yeah, it's pretty much just all girls now.
He eliminated one of the greatest things of all time, because I could name you guy after guy, right? Wild Red Barry went with the Kangaroos and made him #1 for a whole year. They got rid of Wild Red Barry. The Kangaroos were never a main event again, ever. Right? The Wizard, he had so many guys that, and the rule was you touch the Wizard, you're automatically fired, right?
Right.
A friend of mine who's very sick at the time, and I loved him to death, was Lou Albano, Captain Lou, right? He had all these guys, right? But he had to interfere in every match. He had to get involved in every match, But I think 25 years, Vince said, I don't want you anymore. And I believe the territory went down after that also.
Lou was awesome.
Yeah.
Going back to Fritz and World Class, did you ever witness any crazy antics with the Von Erich boys, or were they too young at this point in time?
The only antics that I want to tell you about, like when Fritz started letting me beat him, Kevin had a very bad habit. He'd throw a punch on his knees, and he didn't care how tall you was. He threw that punch, and he hit me right below the belt.
Right.
I started swelling up inside, so I knocked him out, right? His one brother came out the ring. I got him in the ring and knocked him out, and Fritz came down. I said, Fritz, don't come in here because me and you will tear the building down. So in the dressing room, he said, you're fired. And I showed how swelled up I was, black and blue. I said, you got to teach this kid. And I said, I'll never put Kerry Von Erich over no matter when I wrestle him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. So that was pretty much it. Any other fond memories that stick out from the World Class territory at all? Or?
Well, at the time I came back.
You worked with Brody down there too, I think, right?
Yes. I was going to tell you, I was the first guy that I know of. It probably happened, but I didn't know. Okay. Bruiser Brody was leaving the territory, and Jimmy Snuka was leaving the territory. One of them was the Texas heavyweight champion, and one was the American heavyweight champion. Well, 1 week, I beat Brody because he was going to Australia. I was the American heavyweight champion, and 2 weeks later, Snuka was leaving, right? And I want to tell you, I probably couldn't beat either one of them, but they made me the Texas heavyweight champion. Fritz chewed Gary Hart out for a month. Why is one guy, the Texas heavyweight and American, never been done? And I had about 3 months of being the Texas heavyweight champion and American heavyweight champion. And then Fritz was always looking for somebody. I think it was the spoiler, Kerry Von Erich. He always wanted someone with the claw hold, like here would be the claw against the claw.
Right.
And he got one or two of them in there, and he just said, I can't have two top heels at the time, so he said, Ox, you got to go.
Wow. What about Captain USA? What are your memories of your matches with Captain USA?
Well, Captain USA was very, very clever. And I don't know if you know it or not, that was Sheik's son. Say.
Right.
Okay. As soon as he started wrestling, he said, I'll wrestle anybody but Ox, right? And he thought, I don't know how he thought he was more clever than his dad and everybody else, right? And every time he got a chance, whatever the territory was doing, it would go down, right? It was just the idea of another promoter letting his son trying to run things.
Right.
And didn't have the capability of doing it.
You also got to work with Jack Brisco, who was NWA champion. What are your memories of Jack Brisco?
Well, Jack Brisco, I'd put him in a Danny Hodge class. I'd love to see them both at their prime in a match.
Right.
Eddie Graham loved Jack Brisco like a son, and he would have kept him the champion as long as he wanted to. But Jack Brisco wanted to run an automobile thing down in Florida, and he just said, "I've been the champion 2 years. That's enough. I don't want to wrestle anymore." But he said, Eddie Graham, anytime that you want to use me on special cards, and Eddie Graham always had Jack on special cards.
You also got to work with Wahoo McDaniel. Members of working with Wahoo?
Okay. Wahoo was probably, in my mind, not only a true Indian, probably the best Indian roster I ever seen, because he had natural ability, right?
Right.
Wahoo's main thing was, Ox, how can we get a return match? He was always thinking of that angle to get a return match. He was his own worst enemy. A couple of times when he was making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year in Crockett's territory, a fan would touch his feathers and he would knock him out, right? And he got throughout the territory 3 or 4 times. Why do you touch the fan? I don't want him to touch my feathers. You could buy 10 feathers, right? But didn't want anybody touching his feathers.
The Spoiler. Memories of working with the Spoiler.
I don't know if a lot of people will agree with what I say, but watching him over the years, the greatest mass wrestler of all times. For a single territory, you have to say the Destroyer out in California, right? But the Spoiler went everywhere, right? He went to Texas, he got over, North Carolina, Minneapolis, and he had one rule which he lived by: I'll never take my mask off for anybody, and he lived by that. And I know he got his notice in a couple of territories because he would never work an angle where they'd make him. And he was very lucky at the time because Gary Hart would only manage number-rated wrestlers. Of all times, Gary Hart loved the Spoiler the best, and everywhere he is, Gary Hart would push the Spoiler. And even Bill Watts' territory, they pushed the Spoiler there. Watts will tell you he didn't want to really put the Spoiler over, but they were so hot, right? Because I'm the first guy to call Bill Watts Mr. God,
Right.
And Bill Watts, as you know, was a promoter, and he tried to wrestle a few times, but he was a much better promoter than he was a wrestler. And somebody told me, I don't know if I can agree with, they said as far as TV angles and that Bill Watts would have to be rated number 1.
Did you like Bill Watts as a person? A lot of people have different things to say about Bill.
When you're a boss, when you're running the territory, if you're making guys money, they like you. If you're not making money, they don't like you, right? Well, Watts, and I got to say this about him, Watts was a great expert in checking out talent, right? When he got the Junkyard Dog, who never made a quarter in the business, right, made him the top guy in his territory. When he took the natural Bruce Reed, right, for 10 years they wanted to run the arena there in New Orleans. They couldn't do it, but the natural Bruce Reed, Junkyard Dog said, "You don't have to pay us if we don't completely sell it out." Right? You have to understand, at the time in Louisiana, there was a bar against blacks wrestling whites. You couldn't do it, but there was two blacks, they didn't care, right?
Right.
And so they filled up that auditorium, and I don't believe two guys ever did it again. And Watts was a good recognizer of talent. He had Big Ernie Ladd, right, to help him, you know. And like I said, guys got mad at Ladd because he was a boss. The guys that he made money for, they loved him. The guys that they didn't blamed him, right? But Watts is a great believer. I'll make you the main event if you get them butts in the seat, right? In other words, you drew him money. Right? In fact, as he always would call me up and say, "I want you for a week," right? Just for a week, I'll pay you $1,000 a week. I would set the territory on fire for a week. He said, "Ox, I asked you for a week," right? So that was one time I called him, "You think you know everything? What are you, God?" And that was a big joke for a few months.
Watch thousands of exclusive shoot interviews right now on TitleMatchNetwork.com.